Welcome to the second episode of the Animal Riot podcast, brought to you by Animal Riot Press, a literary press for books that matter. It's your producer, Katie, here, and this episode has been edited to reflect our new name. If you're new to the Animal Riot community, welcome, and you can find out more about us at animalriotpress.com. Now on to the episode with your hosts Brian Birnbaum and today's guests, Devin Kelly, George Sawaya, and Jared Marcel Pollen.
Okay, so we just did introductions and had technical difficulties, so now we're going to do introductions again, starting with Devin. Again.
Yes. Hello, I am Devin Kelly.
Again.
I am a writer and teacher living in New York City. I am the co-founder of the reading series and a graduate from the Sarah Lawrence College for Liberal Studies.
Very liberal.
That's good. That was much less begrudging than last time.
Thank you.
All right, Jared, you too, and say the thing about the fish and your mother again.
My mother is a fish.
Okay, good.
My name is Jared Pollen. I also went to Sarah Lawrence College, class of 2015, with all the other fine gentlemen you'll hear on this podcast. I'm Canadian by birth, and at the moment, I'm currently living in Prague.
By birth, we're gonna have to unpack that.
Yeah.
Later.
Canadian by birth.
Naturalized birth. I was popped out on Canadian soil.
All right, George.
I am George Sawaya. I am a novelist and poet who also went to Sarah Lawrence with these fine gentlemen, including the Canadian. I'm currently serving 3 years in Florida because my girlfriend is in their MFA program. So I've been pacing the muggy swamp dongle of our country for about half a year now. So my sentence is
Beautiful.
Is slowly winding down. I'm making marks on my cell with a tack that I've managed to hide from the guards, which down here are just alligators. They're the guards. So there you go. Roll Tide. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. That was
Tide.
a novel right there. There's something there. There's a lot. Well, I am Brian Birnbaum, and I also went to Sarah Lawrence College, got my degree in fiction, class of 2015. Let's raise our beers. Come on. Here, a little cheers, everyone.
That's what I mean.
And to Katie, because Katie's our lovely producer of this beautiful podcast.
Here.
Also a Sarah Lawrence grad.
Yeah.
So it's all in the family. So, okay, moving on. Now we must introduce our challenge.
Yes.
Okay. The challenge is this. It's very simple. This hour's brand of fuckery is brought to you by I don't know. I want to say moderation.
Here.
So yeah, moderation. So we're just gonna drink beer and not be allowed to piss until we're done this podcast. I don't know. Should we have a rule on how many beers we have to drink?
At least
3. At least
I was gonna say 6.
6. We only have 12, and Katie's having one.
4.
Yeah, well, I feel like I'm at a slight
4.
advantage here because I'm drinking whiskey and it doesn't pass through the system nearly as speedily as beer does. So
That's fine.
Yeah,
That's fine. Cheating is acceptable.
okay.
I already have to pee, and I'm not even drinking anything. But that's what I spend most of my life doing is peeing.
So today we're going to talk about the literary industry, that great monolith that every writer beats their head against. So we're gonna start with what is the present state of the industry? What do we think about it? Where's it going? Where is it now? What are its prospects? Devin, you go.
Great. I think the literary community the industry. Sorry, the literary industry is doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing, and it is doing a fine job of that. I think being a writer, an active writer in this moment can at times feel frustrating, especially if you are writing a kind of prose, or I think mostly prose, which is what the industry makes money on, that is concerned more with art than sellability. I think the industry is part of capitalism, and capitalism often makes the idea of art a hard thing. Often will create an art that's sellable rather than art that some artists might be able to sort of respect or get behind.
Anyone else want to chime in before I berate everything about the system?
Yeah, well, the literary industry, much like any other industry, is at the mercy of the market. Even the industry itself obeys what it believes the market is calling for and guiding them towards. Based on my experiences talking with people in the publishing industry, the logic is very circular. If they don't think a book is worth investing in, it's because they have no reason to believe that anyone's going to buy it. But there's really no data to support that, because there are plenty of examples that we can think of where books that no one expected to do very well became very successful, and then the standards of saleability became redefined. I mean, we see this all the time, but books that were sleeper successes or sort of grower successes with books like The Empathy Exams or with Leaving the Atoka Station. These were books that were published by small presses, and now those writers have been picked up by mainstream presses are being paid much larger figures for their work. And previously, the industry had no confidence in those writers. So it's a question of getting the right kind of attention for this work, which I agree, Devin, that there is this kind of dichotomy between saleability and artistic value, but the challenge becomes getting the attention to the extent that the industry will want to pay attention to you and reward that.
Yeah, I also think there's something you said in the beginning, investing in the writers, right? And that's actually kind of like the mantra of what we want to do is invest in our writers, because there's kind of no point in picking up a book that you're not going to invest in. Because I understand what you were saying, essentially that, so, sometimes I won't even pick up a book because it's not worth investing in. But I see the so-called mid-list on so many, presses, imprints, the bigger houses, etc. They basically pick up books and then don't publicize it. And, that's not even circular thinking. It's kind of just this like road to nowhere that makes no sense to me.
Yeah, the imperative seems to be very much on the ROI and not on the growth of the writer. I mean, there was a time when publishing houses invested in writers. I can't remember which publisher it was. George, you might know. Paid Bukowski something like $35,000 a year to produce books for them, and he was a contracted writer essentially for that publisher for the rest of his life.
Yeah, I can't remember.
That's another thing we've been thinking of.
Wasn't it Black Sparrow? I don't think that was a big press, which is fascinating as well. Mm-hmm. I think it's a good example. I think he wrote for a book, San Francisco, or maybe it was City Lights. I think it was a San Francisco press that just sort of invested in him. But it's a good example. Lights? Yeah, the bookstore has a press, I think. Yeah. But it's a good example of how it's possible to invest in your writers. I mean, I'm not a huge Bukowski fan, but it's a good example of how
he was a shit.
Yeah, of how you don't you can create an example of investing in your writers, even if you're not part of the mainstream industry. I could be wrong. I mean, but I think that the people who published him were not huge publishers.
What a brilliant model that is, though. I mean, like this idea of patronage, because I think really we could all agree that all we really want to do is write and make a living off of it. It doesn't even have to be I don't think any of us are after Stephen King money or Garth money, Risk Hallberg money. I mean, that would be great, but I just want to.
I thought you said golf money.
Golf money.
I thought you said golf money. I was like, yeah, I'm ready to hit the links.
Phil Mickelson, Tiger Woods,
that Tiger
spectacle.
Woods money.
John Daly. I'd be the John Daly of the literary industry.
That's John
niche.
Daly.
It's a very niche reference.
No one should watch golf. Don't worry about that.
Well, I think any writer really wants. Perhaps, I will say what I want. What I would want as a writer is the security to write my work and know that it will have an invested publisher, and I would like to be taken seriously as a writer by at least a handful of people.
Yeah, we all, that brings up a good point, and I have this as kind of like our next bullet point, but we can blend it into this one, because we all have our own personal experiences with the industry. But Devin, you should talk a little bit about yours, just considering the fact that I think it's kind of incredible that basically Devin has a book that a lot of presses are interested in, and yet it seems like they're only interested in it if he has another one ready behind it.
Yeah, I think that I have a book in the works of essays, and I've gone through the experience of trying to sell it along with an agent, and it's that experience is fascinating because you realize that it's not always about the quality of the work. It's sometimes people pass on it because the work is not extremely relevant to the moment, which is understandable, though frustrating. But I am in the situation now where the book is not buyable on its own, but I have had people say that you should that they would be interested in the book if there was another book to offer with it.
And what about it is not viable?
Yeah, that's my question.
What about my work?
What would the other book do? This so-called second book that you released do to make the first book viable, other than give you a platform?
Yeah, from what I know about the industry, there's the sense that maybe it proves to publishers that you can write a second book, so that they're not risking an investment just on one, But from what I do know about the industry is it's simply a way, I think, for publishers to get you to write 2 books for the price of 1. It seems like that is the main reason. 2-book deals are not unheard of. I mean, I think that they might actually be the norm now. That especially if you have in fiction, if you have a story collection, story collections I've heard are quite hard to sell unless you have a novel attached to them, especially like a finished novel or the bulk of a novel. And that gets to Jared's point, I think, about this idea that your point about sleeper books and books that surprise the industry is what was Carmen Maria Machado's book, Her Body and Other Parties, is still on the New York Times bestseller list. And I wonder, she doesn't have a novel.
My question is, because
I won the Grey Wolf Prize for fiction or something. Grey Wolf picked it up and now it's...
Well, to your first point, because I fail to see the efficacy of deciding how a book is going to do before you even try and put it out, and wanting to pick it up in the first place. But that's the conversation we're having now. But I'm also curious do you think that book, or do you know if that book blew up on its own merits without too much publicity firepower before it, or did they throw their weight into it and then it kind of blew up?
Well, Grey Wolf is an indie press that's essentially I would say it's a big press masquerading as an indie press at this point. And I
bigger
think,
than Coffee House, I'd say.
Yeah, and I think books like Jared, you brought up empathy exams. I think that books like that helped usher it into the sort of national conversation. And I do notice with Grey Wolf that there are certain books that they sort of push. I also don't know if she had an agent or you can hire a publicist that really.
Well, that's why I asked the question.
That pushed the book out there.
I believe that Grey Wolf no longer accepts unsolicited submissions, so that's an indication that they've reached the next level.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
And but I mean, I've heard nothing but. I've heard nothing but good. I haven't read Her Body and Other Parties, but I've heard nothing but good things about it. And I think more so, regardless, it is a testament that a story collection can sell, which there's a myth attached to publishing. I think now that people don't want to read story collections; they want novels.
Well, that's what Jared's got a collection coming out with Political Animal. What's their imprint called? Is it Crow's Nest?
Crow's Nest Books. That's
Crow's Nest. Yeah,
an imprint at the University of Toronto Press. But the success of some short story collections by writers that we do know and are established, albeit in the past couple of years, show that there is no basis really, even based on this kind of market logic, that short story collections don't sell. If you look at a book like Train Dreams by Dennis Johnson or 10th of December by George Saunders, which was a huge success. I believe 10th of December was even nominated for the Pulitzer. And then Alice Munro a couple of years ago won the Nobel Prize for her work, and she's an exclusively a short story writer.
I guess
so I don't know where publishers and agents alike, because most agents in their biographies sometimes they'll have a disclaimer saying I don't accept poetry or short story collections. It's not even on the menu. So I don't know where that assumption comes from that people don't want to read short stories.
Yeah, I mean the reason I brought that up is just basically because for example, Atticus Lish, what's that book called again? Preparation for the Next Life.
From Tyrant.
So it's from Tyrant. That book blows up out of the blue, but then. Since starting to reach out to publicists to work with us, we realized that Lauren Sarand, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, she works with several notable authors, and she's pretty big. If she made that book by herself, is that really a sleeper success? You know what I mean?
She pushed it out there.
What does that mean? Who's putting their book in, and then they're deciding, oh, this is good enough to get publicized, all that.
Yeah. I'd like your take on it, George. What do you think it's fair? What's happening now in the industry? I think maybe, and what is the role of the artist in this industry? Is the role of the artist to navigate the industry?
It shouldn't be. I mean, we talked a little bit last podcast about how, really, if you want to be a writer, it's sort of the cheapest thing to get into. You just need a piece of paper and a pencil. Or a finger and a patch of dirt outside. You can make your markings, But when it comes to succeeding within the industry, there is this sort of, I think this gatekeeper system that doesn't exist in any other sort of viable commodified art form. I don't think that it finds a counterpart in music. I don't think it finds a counterpart in cinema, because cinema is just the same players. It's not like people say, oh, everybody's got a novel, and then nobody says everybody has a feature-length film in them, right? It's a different undertaking. So here we are. We're able to get into the craft with almost no like overhead investment. But when it comes time to disseminate what we create, we find ourselves sort of loitering in the shadows of these great towers where these clattering machines pump out page after page, and we sort of have to audition, and it's certainly not a meritocracy. I mean, we know that personally, right? We know that just because a book is good, a novel is good, a poem is good, a collection of short stories is good, generally means next to nothing. Honestly, it gets you one eye worth of attention. And then you've got to dance and start talking about market viability and timeliness and these other things, or like they did to you, Dev, where it's like, yeah, you've got one book, you got another. Like what times are these where we have to sell these like a BOGO, buy one get one? Like they should just come wrapped together with a ribbon. There seems to be so little service paid to the writer of late, and I think that's because as a creator we've fallen in esteem. We're not looked at like artists because these great publishing houses have over commodified the product, and now just because you make it doesn't mean anything, honestly, unless you're going to go win some awards, or unless it gets picked up to be turned into a movie, or unless you're writing about boy wizards, sparkly vampires, really subdued BDSM, etc. Right? There's just not a lot. There's just not a lot that the public seems thirsty for.
Softcore BDSM.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
Tender,
softcore BDSM.
Tender bindings.
Gentleness.
Yeah.
Tender bindings.
I think we should all whisper that into the microphones.
Wait, but the thing is, if you have
tender,
if you have
BDSM,
no, if you have softcore BDSM, like I can. Okay, so do you guys watch Billions? Has anyone seen Billions?
No.
Like Giamatti's character on Billions is into that shit. Yeah, okay, so he's into that shit. So like I can see that they don't show like penetration. Is that like subdued BDSM? George, where have you experienced subdued BDSM?
I think he's referring to 50 Shades of Grey.
That's exactly it.
That's what
okay.
Well, I would like to play devil's advocate to your point, George, which I wholly agree with. But some disagreement is palpable. Is not. No, that's the wrong. Some disagreement is good.
There's far too much agreement going on.
Yes, we simply cannot be a chorus of just gentle anger. But
yeah, let's bring out the gossip.
But your point about like who are we to complain, or this is my devil's advocacy. Like who are we to complain or judge? Like I saw A Star Is Born a couple weeks ago, which is like a multi-billion-dollar film, and quite enjoyed my time. Yesterday, I ate at McDonald's for breakfast and lunch, and Popeyes for dinner.
Wow!
And did my due duty of participating.
Wait, McDonald's breakfast? Did you get? Wait, no. Did you at lunch? Did you get breakfast again?
Yeah,
or did you get lunch
at noon, I got an Egg McMuffin and a hash brown. At 4 p.m., I got a 4-piece. I got the buttermilk tenders.
Wow!
And
this is demoralizing.
At 8 p.m., I got the number 3 from Popeyes.
So what is the literary version of
that?
Of
Popeyes
that?
3.
And yeah,
the Popeyes is great.
The Popeyes number 3, the chicken tenders, the Egg McMuffin. Like what are we putting out?
Well, I think the Egg McMuffin is like Harry Potter. I think it's somewhat good for you. It's not that bad for you.
I might take offense to that because I actually really like.
Well,
Harry Potter.
I enjoy Harry Potter. Maybe Harry Potter is wrong. I don't want to offend that large.
Jared's got something to say.
Okay, say
Jared, what do you got?
Yeah,
what do you have to say?
That very large and rather prickly community, the Harry Potter fans. Yeah. If you look at the three, as far as I know, best-selling books since the beginning of the millennium, they are the Harry Potter series.
This is good data.
And 50 Shades of Grey.
Da Vinci Code is good. Yeah, that should
only,
be one.
only one of which is any good, and those are the Harry Potter books.
Okay.
Thanks for saying that, man.
Yeah, and at some point, maybe today, we should all talk about what we mean by good.
So this is perfect. He just named 3. But
you named 3 things.
3 things. So let's assign them to each. So yeah.
Okay, then actually,
I would say the McMuffin is Harry Potter because I think that's the only quality thing.
And I retract. I think Popeyes is a fine establishment. Does exactly what it's supposed to do, and it does it
Here's the
as
thing.
well as it can, and
If
that
you've-
seems to be the Harry Potter.
If you've ever carried a briefcase, a Popeyes made cardboard briefcase of fried chicken, you haven't lived.
It's true.
Or you haven't descended into the true depths of.
Yeah, far be it from us to slander Popeyes. It's been good to all of us.
It has.
Yeah, so
I think
basically,
50 Shades of Grey is the Egg McMuffin.
Let's talk about that story though, real quick.
Okay.
Because
That's true.
I will always remember this because this is the night before I broke up with my ex-girlfriend.
Yes.
And I think when you carry around a briefcase of Popeyes chicken, that's when you know. You're like, what
That's when you
what,
know.
You also-
what,
you-
what have
I-
I done? You must change your life. We were
Yeah,
talking
the
about
real
this
K.
last. Yeah,
But
that-
you also-
That's the last line of a Rilke poem right there.
You also carried it. It wasn't just like you. It wasn't like you did the duty of getting Popeyes for a party. Like you went out of your way to get this. You carried it like 20 blocks.
yeah. Did I carry it?
Yeah, we took the
So we were
at-
took the
George.
metro.
We
We
were
took
drunk.
the metro from Katie's place up to 125th.
There we go.
and by the time we were coming back, I don't believe the metro was running anymore, or if it was on like
Yeah.
a half-hour basis. So we had to wait
We
in the
fought
metro,
that
and
that the night?
not only was it a briefcase, it was a briefcase that was in the shape of a barn. Like it had like a pitched roof on it.
That's right. That's right. And the handle was like, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and I don't know if anyone remembers, but we all fought that night.
Not in an
verbally.
antagonistic way.
We
but
actually
a
just-
physically
we
sibling sort of
yeah,
like
3 or 4 floors above the city. We just went. We went.
just
We did.
wrestled.
Yeah, we reenacted that way that brothers and sisters. Yeah, that brothers and sisters go from play fighting into a hint of like slightly more forceful fighting.
Yeah.
That you realize that there is a lot
There's
of
real-
deep.
yeah,
There's deep-seated rage that like is laying underneath the surface of our relationship with all of us here.
Yeah,
was a
real
beautiful
grievances were aired.
But anyway, okay, yeah. So what did you say was the Egg McMuffin?
I now think that, and I think George, I honestly think George and I are the best people to talk about this because I think we probably eat this stuff the most.
Yeah. But I will say
I-
McDonald's breakfast is the only fast food I'll eat.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
And it's
I
good.
think
totally
it's
agree.
absolutely
And
wonderful.
I think your question about its goodness, I think that the Egg McMuffin is now 50 Shades of Grey because it is sort of like it is a bland sandwich. It is the Egg McMuffin.
Yeah, it's like-
it is a muffin. It's the tender BDSM.
Yeah, it's also an appropriation of a proper sandwich too. From what I understand, 50 Shades of Grey began as Twilight fan fiction, and then it was sort
Yes.
of modified slightly.
That's a good.
That's a hard left.
Yeah, that deepens
Like, that's-
the actual. Like this was a surface level conversation.
That's
now that,
honestly-
that adds it some nuance.
No, I'm going to say right now, I plan to put out a new blog post about starting with a month of reviews of Hallmark films, and I will say that the hallmark of a Hallmark film is that it appears to be leading towards either a porno or a horror film, but it just never quite gets there. But it's like who wrote 50 Shades of Grey?
Oh, who knows?
Who knows?
E.L.
Whoever wrote it.
James.
Oh, E.L. James.
E.L.
I was gonna say
James.
Darius Rucker.
Did that.
Someone not worthy of the abbreviation EL.
They started writing
Darius Rucker, Hootie
this fan fiction, and they said this is approaching this thing, but I'm not going to just approach it. I'm going to just start doing.
Who is he? Has anyone seen E.L. James?
No.
Is he or she real? She's
It's a
real.
she.
It's a
She's
she,
real.
and it is a pseudonym, a nom de plume, from what I understand.
Okay, it is a pseudonym.
Oh, that's upsetting. I was
Yeah.
going to egg the fuck out of their house.
Their mansion,
But actually,
their
I mean,
mansion. they live
I-
in the biggest damn house wherever they are. Their house
chalet.
is huge. Yeah, it is a castle. It is the castle that subdued BDSM built.
Yeah.
Make no
Oh my
mistake.
God.
I know we'll get back to the literary industry, but I think that Brian's point about Hallmark movies, Brian and I and Katie as well had many a night in our old apartment where we would binge watch like Nick Cage films.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that there is an unmitigated joy in doing that. And some of them are like quite
Good.
Some are good and some are weird.
Joe was
Joe
great.
is good. And some are
A
weird
recent
that you
film.
appreciate them. And I think that that's an admirable quality for something being so weird or just out of place or strange. And I think, again, I don't know, it calls into, like, those are, well, actually, maybe this adds nuance to the conversation because some of those Nick Cage films are like really low budget. But
SS Indianapolis.
yeah, but there is a pleasure. There's a pleasure in watching things like that in Hallmark movies or Nick Cage films or reading 50 Shades of Grey that I think maybe shouldn't be lost on us, or at least is good to keep in consideration when we feel perhaps slighted by the industry.
No, see, I don't think that's that pleasure that you described in watching bad films that are so bad that they're pleasurable. That's something that I think does not carry over to literature. That's an important distinction between literature and in other mediums, especially.
I'm trying to think of an example.
Like I'll watch Predator or Snakes on a Plane or something like that and lay back and just be coddled, and enjoy myself shamelessly. But I would never do that with a book. I would never dedicate, a week or 2 weeks to my life to a book that is absolute garbage because it delivers this kind of shameful pleasure.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be interesting though? Think of all the good actors who are in bad films and who have most good actors, even Daniel Day-Lewis did 9, which sucked. It would be
interesting because he wanted to do a musical. I think he wanted to sing.
But it would be funny to me if I don't know, name your favorite literary fiction author, and every 3 books they had, if Don DeLillo threw one he has some books that aren't as great, but purposefully just wrote a bad book.
But are we talking about a pot boiler, or are we talking about literal trash?
I don't know.
Well, Faulkner did that.
Yeah, so did Hemingway.
Faulkner wrote under a pseudonym, and they wrote for Hollywood as well. The writers like Fitzgerald, Hemingway, Faulkner, Vidal, they all wrote screenplays for Hollywood films, and none of them took it seriously. It was just a paycheck for those.
They had the decency to hide themselves.
You had Cormac write that.
Right, exactly. So this reinforces the distinction that I'm trying to make, which is that you can't really do that with any kind of integrity with literature. Literature is not a medium that lends itself to that kind of shameful play where you can read a trashy book and still enjoy it on some kind of, debased level. Yeah. You can do that with the cinema. You can watch a 2-hour film like Sharknado or something like that and derive a lot of shameful pleasure from it. But I think it's understood, maybe just because of the history of literature, because where literature has come from. It's come from a different place than the cinema. The cinema, when it first became an art form, was regarded as a vulgar form. It was regarded as a mass form. It wasn't taken seriously. It took time to sort of earn its credentials as a serious art, whereas we've always taken literature to be a serious art, so we don't look for that kind of shameful pleasure.
Well, I would say that we don't.
That's a good point, Jared.
There are plenty of people go and after having worked at a library for just shy of a decade, plenty of people come in wanting the trash, A lot of even very avid readers love to come. I mean, we checked out more Harlequin romance novels about immortal Highlanders or dudes that rode motorcycles but were also werewolves than we checked out in poetry. And that kind of shit flew off the shelf. That's sort of the equivalent of the Hallmark movie or the Nick Cage movie, right? Just these. Or sort of the action rompers. I'm thinking Lee Child, who just had, what's the name of his titular Marine character? I mean, once that movie came out, those things, you can keep those things on the shelf.
Isn't he Jack Reacher?
Jack Reacher, that's who I'm thinking about.
Isn't Lee Child Jack Reacher?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I saw he had a book giveaway at a minor league baseball
game. Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I'm really upset you didn't bring copies home for us. But there's an intersection right there that almost is kind of like a caveat in what Jared was saying.
Yeah.
Basically those books are trash.
But aren't they most of the market? Literary fiction, I believe, when I last looked at a pie chart a long time ago, literary fiction is a small slice of the market.
Oh yeah, it has to be.
I think
I bet it always has been.
You can probably speak better to that as you just did, George, because I think you more so than any of us have been engaged with the public outside of writers as a librarian.
Oh yeah,
and have a better sense, I think, of just anecdotally what people want.
It's great to work in a library because you can sort of witness on the street level the average reader's relationship with the publishing industry. And what it is that they're checking out and what it is that they want. 1 out of 10 people, if they asked for a recommendation from an adult services librarian, probably wanted something literary. I would say about 1 out of every 10 people wanted the book that they saw that was nominated for a Man Booker or...
I'm sorry, George, hold on. An adult services librarian sounds very conspicuous.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
That sounds very softcore, subdued BDSM.
Bondage. Yeah, we're subdued after-hours librarian. I mean, hell, I mostly peddled smut, so I might as well have been some kind of illicit.
Behind the beat.
But I mean, the Harlequin stuff, that was most of what we had. Most of what flew off the shelf was the Immortal Highlanders for Christmas. Those are like the Christmas sex novels with the Immortal Scotsman. That was big, and just pretty much every variation on that theme. Hot guy, the throbbing member literature, really.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's the title of this episode. The throbbing member.
The throbbing member.
But no, I want to finish this though. We got the Egg McMuffin is.
Wow, we are still on this.
Yeah, no, yeah. There's not like.
Because I want to bring it back to literary fiction, but let's be quick.
Okay, yeah. We'll come back to this at the end. You go on literary fiction.
Well, okay. So
I want to talk about a little bit more of our experiences too, just because I think our experiences. I don't think it's a coincidence that all of us have been met with resistance. Oh wow, our producers are asking us to check in with everyone's bladder situation.
Should be like between 1 and 10. 10 is Niagara Falls. Holding back Niagara Falls.
I'm at a 2. I'm not gonna lie.
I'm perfectly fine, but I'm running low on whiskey.
But assign a fucking number, Jared.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at like a 1.5. I'm very low.
Wow. I think we need to start drinking more.
I'm probably at a 3.5.
I'm on my second beer.
I'm on my third.
Your third? Okay, I gotta catch up.
George, how are you?
I think I'm right about there with you, Dev. 3.5, which is unusual because normally I'm at any given point of the day I'm at least a 6. Like I can pee at any second of the day. But I am a compulsive hydrator.
Yeah. No, I wanted to bring it back to because I do think some sort of there is I think it's justifiable to feel like a bit, especially as a literary fiction or just a literary writer, a more focused literary writer in general, to feel slighted by the publishing industry. And I saw this. I generally am not one to, as everyone knows, to start
wars,
condescending conversations.
Yeah.
But I did see this. I saw someone reputable post this on Twitter, so I feel okay asking it. What was the most maybe hyped up book in the past few years that was supposed to be really, really good and just wasn't?
Yeah, I mean, that's easy.
And
I don't know if Katie's nodding her head.
Yeah, but can we all?
Are you thinking of City on Fire? Yeah, okay. Okay. So I actually thought City on Fire was actually decent. I thought it was good. I actually thought it was good.
Maybe also juxtaposed with one that is also. This is me being a good person. Juxtaposed with one that was quite good. Like juxtaposed with a hyped up book that actually met the standards that you ascribe to good literary fiction or nonfiction.
Oof, that's tough.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you guys have an idea?
J.K. Rowling came out with an adult, like a more adult focused book.
Oh God.
What was it called? Sense of an Ending?
The Popeye's chicken of writers.
Sense of an Ending came out. And people were backflipping into the library to grab a copy, and almost as quickly as they went out, they poured back into the library. It was like a wave at high and low tide. Like they came in, and then they dropped the book on their way out. Like they didn't even check it out. They got through the first 3 pages.
Yeah.
They let it fall to the floor, and they continued mid-stride wherever they were going. That was a huge, I think, critical and commercial failure. And then they went and made it into a movie, of course.
Well, didn't she release the book under a pseudonym, and then they had to reveal that it was actually J.K. Rowling who had written it to try and
That's exactly what they did. Yeah.
And that's when
it tells you the author is not dead, but the author still has cultural currency.
Yeah, no, that's when Kirkus comes back and says the book was actually good.
Yeah. But I'm also more interested in books that were like that are being billed as sort of literary fiction or literary nonfiction. Like I think Jared, you brought up a good example with Leslie Jameson. I read Empathy Exams. I really loved. One of my favorite books of essays. I read her book The Recovering, which came out from Little Brown and was much hyped, and found it to be like, I thought that the writing was wonderful and the story as well. But I found it to be like 200 pages too long and grew it felt like a slog to get through. To me, the best book that came out that met the hype in like the last 5 or 10 years in terms of literary fiction was What Belongs to You by Garth Greenwell.
Oh, yeah. I quoted that book in an essay.
I love that book.
Which I have not read. But what about Zero K? What about DeLillo's latest novel?
Jared, see, I love that you brought that up because I put that book down like you put down Purity.
Yeah, but it's
you know
also,
what I mean. I said, fuck this. Fuck this. Let's talk about this. This is great. I love this.
But that book also didn't get much hype to begin with anyway.
But he's done. He's done.
He's
So
done.
Well, no, I mean that was DeLillo's first book in like 7 years.
Yeah.
He got a lot of hype.
Well, maybe people realized that it wasn't that great, and I feel like that the hype wasn't that long lasting, if there was any hype.
Did you like it, Jared?
I have to confess, I haven't read it. I just brought it up because I thought it'd be good for the
Oh,
conversation.
yeah. No, I'll admit. I mean, you know my feelings on DeLillo. I think he peaked with White Noise. I don't know. Zero K was just
he peaked 30 years ago.
yeah, pretty much. I'm serious. I mean, yeah. I just think like he's an American treasure in the industry. You know what I mean? So like his name's gonna be consecrated on whatever he puts out. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah, there's like a pantheon of great American writers like DeLillo, Toni Morrison,
Right.
Cormac, who are still alive.
Toni Morrison, the first black person to win a Nobel Prize. I'm pretty sure, or a Pulitzer.
Check that.
Yeah, fact check that for us, please.
And she has a book coming out, I think, of essays.
Yeah.
But there's like a pantheon of great American fiction writers who are sort of in that like consecrated state where people will buy whatever they put out. I don't think and this is maybe something to talk about as well to add to the continued list. I think one thing about our industry that's different now is that it doesn't allow for that. There's very few, like you have Roxane Gay, you have a few people who are like
No one's a superstar.
Yeah, you have a few people who are like
god.
in their mid career right now who you can see will be putting out books for the rest of their lives, but I'm hard pressed to name, like it just seems like people just put out books and then sort of wither away.
I'm gonna take a leap right here. I mean,
leap.
this might even qualify as a tangent. I was watching some scientist on Joe Rogan's podcast talk about how close we are to basically figuring out physical reality, and I wonder if there is any. Okay, we got a fact check coming in. First black woman to win a Nobel Prize. Okay, yeah, so
It's Toni Morrison.
Which I love John Thompson's quote, by the way. John Thompson, coach of the Georgetown Hoyas, the great Patrick Ewing, Allen Iverson. Was he there? That was later. But anyway, John Thompson was the first black coach to win a national championship, I'm pretty sure. And he said, it doesn't mean that I was the first black coach that was able to do so. I was just the first one given the opportunity. And I think that's very important to be noted.
Coach.
Anyway, we shall continue.
His son, not so good.
What I want to talk about real quick is, do we think that language is on the verge of becoming almost irrelevant as a truth-giving sequence because of science? But at the same time,
weird.
because physics is. But here's the caveat: physics is not being disseminated to the masses or taught in schools as it should be. We don't know what's going on in the latest realm of physics. Like string theory, Einstein kind of shit is like almost old hat by now.
Sure.
Like we know that it's a very flawed theory, and there's a lot of stuff that we know now that no one else knows.
Yeah. I see George looking furtively around.
Look at Jared's like fuck you.
Jared's ready to answer. George is maybe George is ready.
No, I just don't know. Is this really where we want to go with this conversation?
Well,
Absolutely.
I was thinking more along the lines of, do we think that like language in prose in the literary landscape, publishing landscape, do we think that language is valued as a way to be excited or to move through a book of fiction or nonfiction? Well,
I will say this much: it's less to Brian's point, but more to the point of what we've been talking about thus far, which is about the relevance that these books have in the culture and what value the publishing industry gives them. You talked about hard science, Brian, and there certainly is a market for the hard sciences in the publishing industry. You have writers like Richard Dawkins and Brian Greene and Steven Pinker and Lawrence Krauss, who all write these popular books about physics, and the culture devours them. So there certainly is a market for that, and the people who write these books, people like Richard Dawkins, and have some kind of status in the culture. They go around the country, they go around the world, and they speak in auditoriums, and they sell out these theaters, and they're public intellectuals. That's something that we can't say for the literary world.
Sure.
There was a time when we had people like Norman Mailer and Gore Vidal, people who went on late night TV and talked to Johnny Carson or Merv Griffin, and they had some kind of standing in the culture. People cared what writers thought. people no longer really care what writers think. I can't remember the last time I saw somebody like that on a late night talk show. It's much more likely to be a scientist now engaging with the culture in that way than a fiction writer, and that shows you how truly little people are interested in what fiction writers think now.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I think your point is apt when it applies to fiction. I know that, like, regardless of like what you think of her writing, I know that Roxane Gay is a contributing editor for the Times. My favorite things that Roxane Gay writes are her New York Times op-eds. There are some of her books I don't particularly enjoy as much as other books. It's about as mean a thing I'll say. But I know that when she is, I think, a really apt commentator and a breath of fresh air on the New York Times opinion page. But I agree with your point that I think a lot of that comes from the fact that she got her literary merit with Bad Feminist, which was a book of essays, even though she had written, I think, a novel and a book of stories, or at least a novel before that. And I think that society does not value fiction writers to the extent that it values any other writer.
I'm really curious.
We haven't heard from George in a while. Let's hear
So George, you go first after I ask this. I'm curious. I'm curious as
it's
to
called cold
whether
calling in the teacher industry.
What's that?
It's called cold calling.
Cold calling.
Yeah, it's a good way to increase class participation.
Okay. So George, I am cold calling.
Fair enough.
I'm not really good at sales. I'm not good at sales, so we'll see how this goes. But I'm really interested in whether we think the industry's worse off than it was before, when it was more central to the culture, as we were just saying, or is it just less popular compared to other mediums such as film and TV and stuff like that?
Well, I mean, I think you see the same thing with literature that you see from the music and the movie industries. The more easy it becomes to disseminate this content into the world for it to be purchased and consumed and have more purchased and more consumed, I think you see this sort of a tremendous inflation as far as how much content is being produced, right? I mean, when you say is the industry better now than it was, I think it's bigger. I think it's much bigger. I think it's the biggest it's ever been. I think that's the same for, streaming video services and the content that they produce. Netflix comes to mind, of course, Amazon. And it's the same for music. I mean, I think now probably there is more music available right now that has been produced over the last 20 years than was ever available in the whole history of our species before that. I would hazard that's almost certainly true, right? Is the industry
probably more so than that?
Yeah, like is the industry better now? I think. I mean, and of course, you guys have a little more familiarity with the industry, given that you live in New York, you interact with agents and publishers more often than I do. But to me, it seems like the thing that most imperils the literary market is the sort of centrality of so many of its bigger players. And to re-mention Amazon again, the publishers are so big and so few. And that seems to me more than anything to be what is throttling some of the creative bursts that we see in the literary market. If I have a band, I can just put my music up on Spotify, straight from me to them. And I mean, of course, as an author, you have the recourse, you could self-publish, but the taboo in the industry is still so heavy and so present. And even so, like if you're not going to get it put on paper, like you want a paper book. That's the dream, right? Don't we all have that dream of getting the box with the novel in it, cracking it open and pulling one out and smelling the paper, You can turn it into digital content, no problem, and try and sell it. But unless you are
Devin's holding up his published book. He's got it.
Very nice. You got to have
it in the box.
Yeah, and also just real quick, we need to check in on everyone. Devin has held up a sign saying that he has to pee.
I do have to pee. I have gone from a 3
to a.
I have gone from a 3 to probably a 7. quite quickly. I'm
Wow,
on my fourth.
seven.
I'm on my fourth beer.
That's pretty high.
Yeah, that's pretty high. I don't know if you're like crying wolf here, man. That's pretty serious.
Maybe a 6. I've gone to.
Six,
There's a
okay.
tingling in my bladder.
I'm at a 4 or 5.
Okay.
I'm gonna say that I can feel it. It's at like, you know.
I
can
could-
we- how anatomical can we get right now?
I could pee.
I'm a 5.
Yeah, I'm sitting at a 5.
Wow. Okay. All right.
So everyone could pee if given the chance right now.
Yeah, exactly. I could.
Yeah.
You know, George, I was thinking,
we
though,
won't.
about your point. To me, the best way that I can describe the literary industry right now, the literary fiction publishing industry monolith, is that, and one of my big gripes with it is that I think the conversation of the world outside of literature, whether that be economics, politics, social relations, I feel that the conversation is guiding the publishing and the writing more than the writing
Yes.
is given credit to guide the conversation.
Yes,
Definitely.
you can even see past leaders.
And
Past leaders were very eloquent and very literate.
Yeah.
Now we have Donald Trump who can't string
Yeah.
together 5
And-
words without making a
And the
grammatical
problem
error.
with that is the problem with that for me more so is actually with books like one of the nonfiction bestsellers of the past year or two was this book called Hillbilly Elegy, which is just a shitty book. It's a nonfiction book about this Appalachian raised born guy, J.D. Vance, who goes to Yale, and is essentially just talking down to everyone everyone from the community he was born in. Like, it's essentially like a you could pull yourself up by your bootstraps if you really tried book.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is not as much that he wrote the book, that you know that the reason that book was published was because we were in the midst of a potential Trump election and that people wanted stories about Appalachia, and this is what they got. They got the cookie cutter, pull yourself up from your bootstraps, everything ties in with the American dream, like idealization of it, rather than the hard truth of it. And that's what happens, I think, when conversation guides publishing more so than people believe in voices and writers to guide the conversation.
Yeah. No, I agree. That's why when you were talking about how it's tough to publish something that's not topical, when we were talking about when you needed 2 books, for the price of 1, that's always struck me as pretty insane. I mean, I know it works. I know books sell if they're topical.
Yeah.
But at the same time, a unique idea rarely comes from something that's necessarily like in vogue. My personal opinion is that I think the industry knows what it's doing, because they know how to make money. But they would almost be better off just cutting literary fiction out of their aims, because they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And indie presses should just take care of it from now on.
I think everyone would be better off.
Right. Well, I think the fact that indie presses are sort of taking it upon themselves to publish serious literary work has relieved larger presses of the responsibility of having to do that.
They can publish their textbooks,
Yeah, and I mean, we all know the way this goes. I mean, this has been the case in the mainstream publishing world for a long time now, where similar to big movie studios, they invest most of their money in a few big releases every year, the equivalents of what like the Avengers might be for a movie studio.
Mm-hmm.
You have big summer releases, and then you have the few sort of respectable fall release titles from writers like Jonathan Franzen and Toni Morrison, the sort of Oscar season for books kind of releases. And publishers keep those writers to maintain credibility and to get accolades and to get literary awards attached to their press. And that's pretty much it. It's a very small pile of money that's reserved for those kinds of writers. It's maybe like 1% of their budget, and it's to keep face in the literary world, to maintain some kind of respectability. But the number of new writers, debut writers that big presses invest in every year is, I mean, practically nil.
Yeah.
If the stories are to be believed, and if our personal experiences are indicative of anything.
Yeah, and they will very promptly jettison an author if their book doesn't sell. Like,
Exactly.
my favorite, one of my favorite writers is who we had read is Noy Holland, who is a great example of someone who is almost entirely concerned with language. And I believe her first book was a book of stories called The Spectacle of the Body, which was published by FSG and never made paperback. I think the hardcover never sold enough. And after that, I believe all of her books were published by a smaller imprint, and she went on to edit for Fiction Collective, a smaller imprint, and just sort of understood that okay, the literary world, that the mainstream publishing world is not for me, So I'm going to create the space for authors who write like me.
Yeah, it's like the music industry.
Yeah.
They all just took control of it.
Yeah, well, I think as important as the mainstream literary industry has been for decades, when it comes to serious fiction, it is sometimes overstated in terms of the posterity of works that it can confer upon works of art. So, for example, many of the great modernist texts that are now staples of any literature program or writing program were books that were published by essentially small presses at their time.
Sure.
Like, for example, Ulysses was published by the bookstore Shakespeare and Company in Paris, and the first printing of Ulysses was 500 copies.
Wow.
And it was sent mostly to critics and to friends of Joyce's, people like Ezra Pound and Gertrude Stein, who reviewed it. Kafka, when his first collection of stories was published here in Prague, I believe it was published only in the Czech Republic, and something like 100 copies were printed. Yeah. And Kafka bought like 99 of those copies because he was terrified that no one else would buy them, so he bought them first before anyone could.
That's a pretty good idea.
Yeah. What about your book, George?
Yeah, George. What? Yeah. What about? You're working on a new one now, but what about the one that you kind of shelved because you did pass that around the suit, to the suits a little bit, didn't you?
Well, the first book got sent to the suits. This last one is in the cooler at the moment, and I'm busying myself with a small one in the meantime. Just something to keep me busy. But I'm terrified of writing my query letter because I don't know how to tell these people who are interested in my writing as a product what the hell I'm doing. Right? It terrifies me. Of the last book, I've been working on some drafts of a query in my head, and I'm fairly sure I'm going to tell them. I probably won't, but I want to tell them that it is the action-adventure encyclical of a dying future religion with hints of, neo-Western and Arab futurism. But who the hell's going to buy that? They don't want that book, It's wild because
I feel like in a query letter, it's like you have to like almost guarantee that the reader's gonna have an orgasm when they read the book. It's like you can't really say what the book is about. You have to say this is where all your hopes and dreams lie.
Yeah, and you know what that makes me think.
And you have to cite existing works of fiction that are comparable to yours. We all know this from writing query letters.
And there's no right answer. There's none.
Right, and if you have a novel and the novel fits roughly a description of another novel that's been published in the past couple of years, you want to put in your query letter to your agent, this book is a lot like this book, and it will probably appeal to the same market.
Sure.
You can only pitch your work on the basis that it's like something else that has previously been successful. There's no confidence.
And that's actually the same too as someone who's worked on a book proposal for nonfiction. That is, there's an entire section of your book proposal that is like a page-long description of other books that have sold and how they've sold that are related to your book. And why yours is different, but also why yours will sell like theirs, and you have to write that yourself. It's crazy.
Which is understandable, but at the same time, going back to go ahead, George.
I feel like that is such a shitty burden to put on the author.
It is.
I'm the last person you should be asking about the market viability of the shit that I'm writing, right? How do I know? How am I supposed to?
Just put me in a room.
Just read the book. Read the book, and if it's good, how about this? You publish it. I don't know why. You can do a small run. You don't have to. Simple criteria. If the book is good, fucking print it. What's the holdup? Why do I have to come to you with independent market research? Idea. That's just make fucking 200 of them. Put them in one store. Print it. What's the problem?
That's not bad. Books that matter. That matter is our current one, but if it's good, print it.
If it's good, print it.
Like that. We should get focus groups and put them in a room and just hold up books. Just with their cover.
Just throw the book at their heads. See, how did it feel when that book hit you? Was that nice?
Well, that's practically what you have to do. Literature stands apart from other popular art forms in the sense that a book is not apprehendable at a glance. You can walk into an art gallery and you can look at a painting and it takes a second and you can say that you like it or you don't. Yeah. Or you can go to a photo blog and you can quickly survey someone's work and judge it very quickly.
Yeah.
You could do the same with graffiti. It takes 2 hours on average to watch a film. It takes 3 minutes on average to listen to a song. Literature is the only medium that requires more time and more energy than virtually every other art form.
Yeah.
So it's at a disadvantage just by virtue of speed alone. It's at a disadvantage.
I got two quick things to say. First is I wanted to jump in on your point, George, about your book, and it made me think of a good friend of ours, Leland Chuck, who runs another small press called 3 a.m. to 713. Sorry, 3 a.m. is a magazine.
Yeah.
713 Books, and I remember I interviewed him for the Millions, and talking about this very thing, and he told me a story about how and his philosophy I think is very similar about publishing books that might not get a lot of play in the industry because they're not relevant but are still
or because it takes a modicum of activation energy in order to get into it.
And but he what struck me once was that he turned down, I think, like his favorite book he read on submission because he wanted it to get published by someone bigger.
Oh, I remember that story. This was about a Kansas dystopian.
It was like a Kansas dystopian Islamic State book written like a Middle Eastern author, and he said it was so good he can't publish it. Like he was like, this is so good that you're going to get an agent.
It's an honorable thing to do.
You're going to get an agent and you're going to get published. And honestly, I would love to follow up with him.
I want to know if he did.
I don't know if he did.
Because honestly,
it would be a sad state, and it would be.
Let me give a good example about this. You know, the next book we're going to publish are actually our former thesis advisor, David Hollander's novel, and he hasn't published anything since the turn of the millennium. And that's because he gives books to agents and editors that just they can't get past some fear of difficulty.
Yeah.
Our producers are telling us that he's been published. He's been published plenty since then, but he hasn't published a novel since then. Yeah, since LIE, which was a fantastic book. And I just read a draft of the novel we're going to put out, and it's incredible. But there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that the reaction that these editors gave him has to be the same as the reaction that all the editors gave Sergio de la Pava when Naked Singularity came out, that behemoth of basically modern day Ulysses. I mean, it's just impossible to get past that resistance. And I think it's very telling that in an email back to me when I gave him my notes, he said that he gave me word for word a quote from the longest response he got from any editor. And it was like 2 paragraphs. You know, that was it. That's the most effort they're willing to put into this kind of stuff. And it's like, there are people out there looking for this stuff.
Yeah.
It's just that no one wants to believe that. They don't want to deal with it because they have a lot of other moneymakers. And, you know, this is bringing back to why I think it's got to be outsourced at this point. It's got to be like, you know, Jay-Z revolutionized music with Rockefeller, with The Rock. Like, that was it. And then the Kanye followed suit and everyone. And, like, it's the same thing with literature. It's just going to take a long time just because of, just like Jared said, it takes a long time to read a book. That's it.
None of it makes sense, too. Because people still love long, like, A Little Life, right? It's like 900 pages. It was on the
City on Fire was 900 pages. That's a lot of why it caught flack, which I actually thought, you know, I just want to say real quick.
A Little Life sold better. Anya, I forget the name. The one with the face on the cover crying. You know A Little Life.
I've actually never heard of this book.
You never heard of A Little Life?
No, I have not.
The crying face on the cover?
No. Bring it up.
It's like 900 pages. It was on the bestseller list. Everyone loves it. People still read it.
There it is. When did it come out?
It's got 4.3 out of 5 on Goodreads.
There you go. Well, yeah, because I think 3.9 is 3.9 is by far the median, or like 3.5. Yeah. Came out in 2015. Okay, yeah, that's what we're getting. I'm getting word in my ear. Yeah. Breaking news came out in 2015.
We got planes landing in the distance.
Yeah. The FAA is all over this. You know, we're good.
Yeah, well, the publishing industry is no different than any other industry in the sense that it really doesn't assume that its audience is that smart. I mean, the industry condescends to its consumers all the time by assuming that they can't handle
the truth,
a certain level of work, that they can't handle the truth, or that they can't handle a certain level of work.
It's run by a few good men. That's the problem. That's the goddamn problem.
Yeah, it is. There are a few bad men.
But it's been shown, like empirically, if you market a book correctly, even if you market a big book like Infinite Jest as a challenge to the reader, as a kind of dare, it's a book that will get people's attention. And unfortunately, because of that, Infinite Jest has become this kind of book now where like most people don't actually read it, but they have it on their bookshelves as a kind of badge of honor. They want to be seen reading it, but they haven't actually read it. But strategically, you know, if you're in the marketing department of a big publishing company, you can do that. You can pitch a big, difficult book to readers with some success.
Oh yeah, definitely. And you know what? And honestly, I think the reason City on Fire failed commercially, relatively, I think, but I know it didn't do nearly as well as The Advance and all that must have hoped for. Basically, when I heard Garth read for the first time and I heard him speak and I was in his class, he taught at Sarah Lawrence, I was like, wow, this guy is a fucking genius. Like, this guy wants to be the next Don DeLillo. I think he can do it. Like, I think he's there. But then I read his book and I'm like, you're hedging right now. The prose is very watered down. The story's good. The language is pretty at times.
We also don't know how much was altered by editors.
We don't know that. We have no idea. Yeah. But at the same time, this is a novel he puts out, and even our director of our MFA program, Brian Morton, said he was surprised at how generous he was. And to me, I took how it was sublimated in my body was like, that's a euphemism for you didn't nut up and really just like do what you could do, you know?
Yeah, what's interesting to me, and this sort of I've been getting more into, as everyone knows, more into journalism. I've had I've published a few journalistic pieces in the past year.
He just reported on Christmas trees.
Yeah, it's coming out. I think that a lot of this also makes me think of, as someone who's gotten into journalism, I've had a few pieces published where I came up with, and this is I think tied into the belief that I think a lot of us have touched on, that I think Jared, you said it, that the industry sort of condescends to the individual. I wrote a piece about for the outline about this guy who's been tracking humpback whales in New York City. It was mostly about this guy. It was sort of a profile of this guy and of the whales, and I had a title for it. I forget what it was, but then they send me the link when it's published, and then the title is just whale watching in New York City. And this happens all the time with people who are publishing journalistic pieces, is they throw in a title that they think matter, and it's just the title. We're not even talking about the bulk of the prose.
Who's gonna click on that?
Yeah, and it's all the clickbait sort of culture that we live in, the retweet culture where we're just retweeting things that we see on the timeline as opposed to clicking on the link and reading everything.
Right.
The amount of times I've had a title changed is fascinating to me, and the titles that they're changed to become far more generic. And I get it, because you get money off clicks. It's like a data-driven thing. You want more people to click on your links, which sounds weird. but
I feel like that's almost like a hedge for people that are getting off on whale watching, like voyeurism or something.
Tender whale BDSM.
Like bestiality.
I was going to say that sounds like tender BDSM.
Yeah, tender. Humpback whales. Humpback whales are beautiful.
Clicking the links.
God, I have to take a piss.
Yeah,
so badly.
The pisses. But I think that
but by the way, I'm at a solid 6, possibly a 7.
I'm at definitely an 7.5, 8.
Yeah.
Okay, we're reaching breaking point. This is Vesuvius here for Devin.
Oh yeah.
No, I can make it another. We're also past an hour, so we understand now that everything we're saying is going to at some point get cut. But anyway, my point is that I think so much of this conversation is, and I think we could talk about this for a long time, it's both about the nature of the industry, it's about the nature of other industries. I think like journalism, I think it's about the nature of things like Twitter and social media. And are we experiencing a dumbing down of culture?
I don't think we're experiencing a dumbing down of culture, because I'm just thinking about the separation of information before the digital age. But I do think we're finding ourselves rapidly approaching a lowest common denominator.
I think you can.
You know what I mean? There's a median of what's acceptable intellectually. I think that's what's really a little bit more scary than a dumbing down of culture in general, you know?
Well, I think you can succeed in systematically lowering people's standards over decades by feeding them trash and sending them the message that they're not good enough or smart enough for anything better. And then people come to believe that they get exactly what they deserve. They don't expect anymore. I think that's something that's empirically true. A book like Lolita, for example, was a bestseller when it was published in the 50s, as was Augie March, as was Lionel Trilling's The Liberal Imagination, which is a book of criticism about liberalism and its relationship to literature. It's almost impossible to imagine any of those 3 books being bestsellers in today's literary environment.
Not a chance. Not a chance. I think, I don't even know where to start for why that is.
I think that's another day.
That's another day.
I think social media.
Yeah, it ties in with the literary industry. It's It's the reason why I think big houses and stuff should, relieve themselves of the duties of literary fiction and all of that stuff. But,
I will say this, George, or maybe you can chime in, is that I do think in all of this hellscape, poetry, for better or worse, is experiencing, I think, a uptick in popularity, maybe.
I think poetry is healthy. Like poetry's doing all right. I
think poetry is doing all right.
You hear about it all the time, like in trying times, people turn to poetry. Right after a tragedy, people turn to poetry. Some of the most famous things that world leaders have said after tragedies have been taken from poetry. I think specifically of Reagan, flip the surly bonds of earth. I think there is a marked uptick in general rabble rousing and like an appreciation of poetry.
Well, I would say my unpopular opinion is part of me doesn't. And this is like the kind of thing, like when you discover a song and you only want like your close friends to hear it, or you want people to know that you heard it first. Part of me does not want poetry to continue to uptick in popularity, because I don't want it to sort of give in to capitalist interests.
I don't think there's any way for poetry
I was about to say the same thing.
Yeah, I don't think that it's at risk.
Poetry is so inaccessible because it just doesn't come out and say the thing that it wants to say. It says it in riddles.
Riddles.
It does. It says things in riddles.
All poetry is riddles.
No, just by virtue of speed, it's an extinct form in some ways. I'm sorry to have to say, and this is coming from somebody who loves poetry and reads a lot
absurd
of it.
Point. I just need to be on record saying that that's an absurd point. Carry on.
It doesn't have... No, but I mean, you can think about poetry in the same way that you could think about blank verse in Elizabethan drama. I mean, people don't write in blank verse anymore because it has no relevance to our culture. That's not to say that poetry doesn't have any relevance to our culture, but I think as a form, it's not the primary delivery system now.
Sure.
The point of poetry is that it slows things down, and it's a contemplation of the moment, and it's ultimately a solitary phenomenon, which is something that is becoming rarer and rarer in culture these days. And if 200 years ago, Byron was a celebrity, he was like mobbed in the streets of London and Venice, and now a book of poetry is considered a hit if it sells more than like 200 copies.
That's because back then,
let's be realistic.
Back then he was spitting hot fire, and hip hop has completely usurped poetry as the form of a verse, It's just totally, and I mean, it's concomitant with just black culture in the 90s, like became the coolest thing in the world. American black culture was the epitome of culture, and they kind of dominated sort of poetic scene over music, I guess you'd say. But
I'm completely okay with this.
We're nearing our end. I love when George talks. Yeah. Carry on.
It's my favorite.
No, I'm
favorite.
completely
I have to
okay
piss
with
so bad, guys.
Poetry is at no risk of being over commodified. It's nobody goes into poetry because they want to write something that's going to sell 1 million copies. And I completely agree with
and I
you,
think
Jared.
if you do, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I mean you're bound to fail, because what is pop poetry?
I'll go on record on that.
I mean, it's still that's what makes poetry worthwhile, is because it is still, predominantly a subversive act. I feel that poetry is inherently subversive. It's done to be, it's done because it gives us joy. It's untainted by thinking about so you have a poem you want to submit to a journal. They're not going to ask you, do you have 10 more poems that we can also publish, or who's the audience for this, or is it what should give us a list of other poems that are like this that have already been published. If the poem is good, they fucking publish it. And that's all I'm asking.
Yeah, imagine writing a poem proposal prior to writing a poem.
Precisely. In this poem, I will
the
titillate
3 poems
the reader.
that this is like, and how
no, basically it turns into like an SEO project. You pick out some words that are gonna be keywords that people are gonna latch onto. It's bullshit.
Yeah,
it's insane. But okay. So hi, my name is Brian, and I have to pee. But I want to ask one more question.
We're nearing our end.
So I want to ask one more question. I'll combine this question with the advent
calendar
actually the best thing the Catholic Church ever did.
Pretty funny, Devin.
The best thing the Catholic Church ever did was create the calendar. The Gregorian calendar is what we live by. Come on,
my mom just sent me a advent calendar via email.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Chocolate.
It's a feat of astronomy.
Freak of astronomy.
It's a feat of astronomy and just will, human will,
Sure.
and faith. I mean, but
beer.
Anyway, I'm drinking Czech beer. I have to pee. My name's Brian. Next question. I want to know, with all of our intranets and all of our technology and all of the things that a Luddite like me fails to navigate properly, where does literature need to go in juxtaposition with all this stuff?
Should we do it one at a time? Or are we?
I don't know.
Let's start closing.
Maybe we should do 1, 2, 3 and say a word that comes. No, I don't know. But I have.
Okay.
My name is Brian. I have to pee.
Where does literature need to go?
Yeah.
Is the question.
I really have to pee.
Who's going to answer first?
I mean, I think we already kind of touched on it. Like, I think we all agree that indie presses need to take the mantle. Of literary work. But
well, I can say this much, which is I don't know if it's at the risk of sounding too sure of myself. I don't know if I can say where literature needs to go. But in relation to the last point, there's no reason to think that literature won't go the way of blank verse or that it won't go the way of poetry. It seems more recently the short story. And when I say literature, I mean fiction, like commercial fiction. There's no reason to think that commercial fiction is a timeless and commercially viable
I
form.
agree.
I suspect that where we're heading now, and this is an argument that I've made elsewhere, and this doesn't just apply to literature, it applies to every medium whatsoever, every delivery system for art. Everything is moving towards a kind of niche. Everything is moving towards a kind of subculture, and that there is no canonical mainstream culture with a single knowledge base anymore. Like everything will be niche in the future.
Which was what do you think, Jared? What was it? Religion? I mean, because literature wasn't the knowledge base before. You know what I mean? What was it?
What was that sort of canonical base?
Yeah. This grand unifying theory of sorts.
Well, I mean, it was religion for quite a long time, and then after the Enlightenment, I would say that it was the tradition of Western literature and science.
Yeah, and I think
science is still very well intact, but literature certainly is not.
No, I really do think science is starting to. I think literature is never going to lose its value in the sense of, do you want to better yourself as an emotional human being in this world? They're like, we are nowhere close in mental health terms or what have you to solving those kinds of issues that books can kind of address. We're not even close. I mean, I was talking to my friend Ben, who's training to be a psychiatrist. He's, I think, at the end of his residency, something like that. And I asked him when he thought that talk therapy would become obsolete, and his answer was never. I think that might be a little bit of a stretch unless we all go extinct. But
it's now becoming like commodified by apps. Like you can now get an app that
that sets you up with a therapist.
I think that ties into my I don't know where I can tell you literature should go, but I can tell you where it cannot go, and literature cannot hang on to the coattails of capitalism. Like that's like if literature decides to commodify it, especially literary fiction and poetry and whatever we ascribe as literature, not like pulp.
At the same time, it will depend on capital, just like classical paintings do at museums.
And I think I think if literature, if the industry isn't, the literary publishing industry will, because it is part of the behemoth of capitalism, will sort of live and die with it. But I think that it is up to people to create a haven for literature that is subversive, that is experimental, that is doing things with language and narrative that is against the grain of sort of late capitalism. That's where it should go. I know that people will do that. The thing is, I trust that people do that. I trust that there are subversive enough people and motivated enough people to do that, and I think that they should. The question is whether or not people can create a resurgence or a growth of like-minded folks who understand that capitalism and literary fiction should never go hand in hand. That is
Devin, that assumes that there's an authentic alternative within a market system.
And there isn't. I mean, that's the problem.
But at some point, technology. Here's the thing, though: is at some point, technology is going to move us beyond a market system, a strictly transactional system, because we all already kind of live in a welfare state, and that will be exacerbated when people aren't needed. I think literature is a good analog for that, in the sense that literature is not needed, although it kind of is. It really is, still, but it's not deemed as a necessary commodity, I guess you'd say.
No, well, to take you up on your previous point, Brian, and then we can go to George because he hasn't spoken yet. But what I'm hearing is that there's sort of two models. The first model is the one that you were talking about, Brian, which is that sort of purpose of literature is to be therapeutic and to be healing. And I'm actually very uncomfortable with that model of literature. In that motivation to write as a writer.
Devin's saying wow as if you disagree.
No, I don't. I just like disagreement.
I do agree with you, Jared.
Challenge
I
comfort.
I can give you my reasons for that.
No, let me say that I think it's a fine line. I think
there's not one.
There's not one answer. There's not one answer.
Good literature can challenge. Good literature can comfort.
And it can teach all that
Very
good
rarely
stuff.
should good literature ever harm.
It depends on what perspective you're looking at it from. Because if you're looking at it from the reader's perspective, I think there can be a very therapeutic value. I think that's a lot of the point.
Oh,
right, exactly. But from the writer's
less alone in the world.
From the writer's perspective, there's certainly an element of therapy in it. But if you're doing it for that reason, I think you are in for a world of trouble, because there's a lot of difficulty that surrounds writing that very much transcends therapy.
Yeah, I'm not demeaning that. All I'm saying is that I think this literary model, which is very much like a sort of post David Foster Wallace model of literature, that literature can be redemptive in its ability to inspire empathy and to make us feel less lonely. There's something a bit slavish about that and something a bit dependent about that. And I don't think that literature is the only way out of feelings of loneliness. I think literature does have a certain ability in being able to provide us a window into someone else's consciousness. That's something that other mediums can't provide. But it's certainly not our only way to empathy.
Sure.
And I think in many respects, contrary to what someone like Wallace would have said, I don't think that our culture is seriously lacking in empathy. I think if anything, we're more empathetic as a species than we've ever been. I agree. And that may be in no small part to literature's contribution. But I don't think that literature is the only haven left that we have for empathy in our culture. And I don't think that should be the model that literature should be.
Far from it. I think the internet is the reason for it. I mean, straight up. There's no and Google.
There's no empathy on Twitter.
No, but not Twitter, but being able to see around the world from your screen, and also search anything you want. Yeah. But anyway, George, give us something about this from George's heart, from George's. From the bottom of George's pore.
You talk about where does literature need to go? As a species, as a society, we're very thirsty for new content. I mean, we consume media and create media at a tremendously accelerated pace now because of the terrific proliferation of eyeballs, right? Everybody wants to go home and watch the next episode. I mean, we've embraced the term binge watching, which tells you just about everything you need to know, right? You see tremendous investment in the creation of new content. You see it from a lot of the streaming services. Netflix, of course, has changed the game. I think literature needs something like this. Literature needs a place where you can sell a book, perhaps wrapped up in some kind of subscription service, where it's okay to take a risk, right? It's okay to start a book, decide you don't like it, go to the next one, right? I mean, I think we need an easier delivery system for something that is traditionally bulky, for something that is traditionally a time investment, like Jared was saying, right? If you could start a book from your seat, a new book, you didn't have to go to the library, you didn't have to go to the bookstore. If you could start, and of course you can do this with reading tablets and things like that, but of course you have to buy it or you have to read the sample chapter, right? But if you could consume literature with the same speed and the same sort of ease that you consume so much of the mindless and quite good television shows, right, that are coming out, streaming services that are putting out, I think perhaps it would change. I think that the kind of books that we would see would change, right? some of the most successful television shows of the last 10 years have been things that would never have been on television before. This uptick, this sort of mass production now. I think specifically about Game of Thrones. Like, who thought that was going to be the success that it was? I mean, it's captured the world, right? It's so big. So I don't know. I think we need a better delivery system to encourage people to play in literature, to experience things that they wouldn't otherwise experience, and to make it a little easier for people to come into it. What that is, don't ask me. I don't fucking know. But
I love play.
Well, no, well, I mean, like, didn't that harkens back to like Dickens and all of them, like trying to serialize their stuff, right?
yeah, in a sense, like, I mean,
okay. So yeah, Devin's giving me the slash throat sign, like he's gonna piss his pants.
Devin looks visibly
Yeah. Jared can see him.
I have to pee so bad.
Okay, so we're gonna wind this down. I want a number from everyone. No, before we do the number,
The Egg McMuffin thing?
yeah, I want every one of our. You're working on a book. I'm working on a book. Jared's got a book of short stories coming out.
Sure.
George, I know you've got a book you're working on. Katie's got a book, but how do we have enough? Do we have enough fast food stuffs for all of our books?
There's so much fast food.
Okay.
Everyone should compare their book.
But are we?
You're talking too slow.
Do we, Devin? My name is Brian. I have to pee. Do we want to just limit this to fast food? I mean, are our books fast food? You know,
Some fast food is good.
No, absolutely not.
All right, my book is the fucking chalupa of
Is that
literature.
Taco Bell?
Yeah.
Wow.
Chalupa is the...
I've literally had Taco Bell once in my
You got the
life.
chalupa, the gordita. My book is like the TGI Fridays of literature.
Ooh, I love it.
My book is the Popeye briefcase
There it is.
of
Yeah.
literature.
God damn
You
it.
don't know what you're getting, but it's probably chicken.
How could you take that from me?
Yeah.
I might.
Oh, did I say
What are
the
you,
line?
George?
Sorry.
I want to know what
my
George
book
is.
is
what do you-
definitely the McRib. Definitely the McRib.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's
The McRib,
It's
huh?
shaped like limited time. You got to
Limited
get it while
time,
it's
yeah.
hot, and
See,
you
like-
want it while it's hot because that's
Yeah.
the safest way to eat it.
And the species that it's made from will soon go extinct.
Yeah.
I will close with a short anecdote to display what my book is, what fast food it is, and just to Devin's chagrin. When I was a teenager, me and my friends got high as shit and went to McDonald's. I hope that one of us that was driving was sober. I don't know. I think so. We were high. It's Devin's going to pee. He literally is getting up to go pee.
Devin is walking back and forth.
Devin loses. That's all I want to say. Anyways, we were high as shit. We went to McDonald's. We went through the drive-thru in typical burn bomb fashion because I was a little imp. In addition to my order, I don't remember what I ordered. I requested infinity barbecue sauces with my order. That is my novel.
Infinity barbecue.
It is an
sauces.
infinity of barbecue.
That's exactly
sauces.
what your novel is. I agree.
Exactly.
Wholeheartedly.
Is it over?
It is. We're done. Devin's desperate. Okay.
It's not over. Oh, no,
Is that it? Devin is defeated.
I'm ready. Let's go another hour.
So yeah, I'm ready to fucking roll, man.
I'm sitting at a 9. You can't
Okay,
see it,
all right.
but I'm totally.
All right, guys. I'm shutting this down. I'm gonna make some closing remarks. Are you guys ready? You guys ready for my closing remarks?
Yeah. What are we gonna do to sign off?
Well, I'm going to say my name is Brian. I have to pee really badly. Devin cheated and peed before this was over. I'm a little miffed about it. And also, don't forget to tune in next time when we'll be discussing, I don't know, we're hoping to have Meher and Chelsea on for the next episode. They're from the Angry Reading series, which they do like 9 blocks from us, if that. But yeah, that'll be a good time, and be sure to stay tuned. As I said, for our launch parties that are scheduled in all of those lovely cities like New York, Seattle, Baltimore, Little Rock, and we'll announce the date for our first release, the book I wrote, Emerald City, and hopefully we'll have our website launched within the next couple weeks. I'm thinking, yeah, a couple weeks. But yeah, thank you all, and have a good night.
Goodbye.
Okay, that's it for today's episode. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and review on whichever platform you're listening. You can get in touch with us on Twitter at Animal Riot Press or Facebook and Instagram at the same name, or through our website, animalriotpress.com. This has been the second episode of the Animal Riot podcast with your host, Brian Birnbaum, and featuring writers Devin Kelly, George Sawaya, and Jared Pollen. Transcripts for our deaf and hard of hearing animals are provided by Jonathan Kay, and we are produced by me, Katie Rainey. See you later, you filthy animals.
Great work, everyone. I'm going to go take a massive piss.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
Is that
That's
it?
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right,
I'm going to take a massive piss.
That's right. You got the headphones here.
Holy dick.
I cheated.
Yes, sir, it's the burn. Bombing on y'all and getting gully as the fern. I don't know much about Lee.